A group of women traveled through time to fight an edit war against a movement led by an infamous moral crusader determined to eradicate women's rights in the future of another timeline. That's the book I'm reviewing on this episode of SFF180. Hello again, everyone. Thomas here, your host as always. Thank you all again for joining me. History, as they say, is written by the winners, which is to say that what we're taught about the past is very likely not always going to be the whole story. Winners are highly motivated to remain winners, and if that means what we learn about history gets heavily edited by those in power, then it's up to us to work that much harder to get to the truth. But what if history itself, and not just the teaching of it, could be edited? You know exactly the kinds of people who would be all over that. The concept of time travel and the dangers and consequences of altering the past is a premise that's gotten a vigorous workout all through the years in science fiction. Poul Anderson wrote several stories about the Time Patrol, who prevent time-traveling troublemakers from screwing around with the past and erasing entire timelines. Similarly, Fritz Leiber wrote about the Change Wars, arguably not all that well. And in more contemporary entertainment, we naturally have stuff like the Terminator franchise. But what about a Time War saga that's rooted in current political concerns about ongoing efforts to roll back women's and LGBT plus civil rights? If that sounds too political to you, try to remember that every alternate history story is about speculating on political inflection points. If one of these stories makes you uncomfortable and another doesn't, well, maybe that's a reflection on who you think the winner should be. The Future of Another Timeline, Annalee Newitz's brilliant second novel, sets up a pretty unique time travel scenario. Geological time machines exist in 5 locations around the world. They've been in place since at least the Ordovician period, roughly 450 million years ago, give or take. Are they machines? Were they put there by aliens like the monoliths in 2001? Or are they some kind of bizarre natural phenomena operating under laws we haven't begun to understand? No one quite knows. All anyone does know is that when specific rhythmic patterns are tapped onto the ground, the machines can transport you through time. And travelers have been using the machines since the earliest days of recorded civilization. But there are rules, which, again, no one can quite explain. You can't travel into your own future, only into the past and back. You can bring the clothes on your back, but no technology from your time. If you want to travel at all, you first have to live for 4 years within 20 kilometers of a machine. And no, you can't go back and shoot Hitler or do anything else that would be an attempt at a massive historical change in one go. Somehow, there's a self-correcting process involved here. Early in the book, we find out that some travelers who went back to assassinate an imperialistic French general were shocked to learn that their target had simply been replaced by an equally tyrannical upstart named Napoleon. But the novel doesn't work because it's got some Sanderson-like focus on systems and rules. It works because of its beautifully drawn characters, its immersive depiction of both past and present settings, and because Newitz knows exactly how much to leave unexplained so that we can still suspend our disbelief and never get confused, despite all the time hopping. There's a moment when we realize that a timeline has actually changed the past for one of the characters, but they don't know it. And it's finessed masterfully. And finally, it works because of the very real passion Newitz has for its themes of freedom and personal autonomy for those living on society's margins. We follow 2 women from 2 different time periods whose lives intertwine, but not quite in the way we expect. Beth is a teenager nearing her high school graduation in 1992 in Irvine, California, or in this timeline, Alta, California. Beth's father is a scumbag in more ways than one. Her mother is distant, and so she finds solace in her group of friends and the SoCal punk rock riot girl scene. But she has one friend, Lizzie, who turns into Dexter whenever they come across abusive, skeevy men. And it's a worrying habit, to say the least. Tess is a traveler from 2022 living in an America where, among other things, abortion has been illegal for decades. She works with a group of women calling themselves the Friends of Harriet, after Harriet Tubman, who, in this timeline, became a senator. And she's discovered that the same group of men are turning up in multiple pasts, pushing a misogynist agenda. Now, these men, as it happens, are working with the infamous 19th century moral crusader and culture warrior Anthony Comstock to make edits to the timeline that erase all gains in women's rights. A woman from the distant future, Morishan, shows up to confirm their goal is a society to make Gilead from The Handmaid's Tale look like a garden party. Once the Comstockers have locked in all of their edits, they plan to destroy the machines to prevent time travel altogether. So, time is of the essence, so to speak, to stop them, and the time in which to do it appears to be 1893 at the legendary Chicago World's Fair, where Comstock himself is going to have to be confronted head-on. Now, if you're foolishly tempted to roll your eyes at the premise of a war between the sexes like this, consider how everything Newitz's story is talking about has only become more disturbingly relevant even in the few brief years since this book's publication. The United States in the 2020s is in the grip of an evangelical movement in politics that can only be called fascistic, and it has already made great gains in rolling back women's reproductive rights, as well as book bans, censorship of history education in public schools, and an unprecedented wave of attacks on the LGBT community. And it's tempting, but you can't really dismiss this as the final flailing death throes of a calcified pathological belief system that knows it's on its way to the dustbin of history, because even if it is dying, it's causing as much actual damage as it can on the way out. Tess and Beth both feel like genuine lived-in characters, and the characters they encounter on their journeys are warm and real. Now, because the Chicago World's Fair is an event I've often fantasized about going back in time to visit, these scenes are naturally my favorites. Newitz populates them with both real figures from history, like the music impresario Saul Bloom, and fictive women who are pastiches of real people. Most colorful of these is the hoochie coochie dancer Lady Asenath, based on a dancer who went by the name of Little Egypt. Throughout the book, the storytelling is never less than completely engaging. The Future of Another Timeline is a timely and thrilling tale to remind us all that each one of us can make our own timeline the best it can be, even through the smallest actions, if we have the courage to rage against the machine. And that is all I have time for in this episode of SFF180. Remember, the most important thing, these are reviews. You're not always going to agree with me, but if you enjoyed watching, please hit that like button, share the video far and wide with all of your SFF reading friends, and above all, please subscribe. If you have not yet done so, that is how the channel grows. You can also support the channel at my TeePublic store and at my Patreon, where recruits into Wink's Army occasionally get little perks like early access to some of my videos. But mostly, the Patreon money is what I use it helps me pay Matt Olson, my brilliantly talented and gifted channel artist, who does all of my fantastic thumbnails for me, including this one, which incorporated the actual Algerian theater from the 1893 World's Fair. Amazing some background work he did there. So thank you all very much for that added support. I greatly appreciate it. I want to thank all the rest of you guys for being the very best viewers in all of BookTube. And until I see all of you next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy reading.